right? But then the question becomes, who is in control of the president? Or who influences the president? And you could probably argue historically, if you're in history classes, it's not technically the president, right? He's got checks and balances, right? But those that influence the leaders, the presidents, the CEOs, those who have the ear of them influence the leader who influences everyone else. So maybe the question for us today is, who has your ear? Who are you listening to? Right? The saying is, choose your friends wisely, right? Because they influence you. They change you. And what we see here in the book of Esther is that the people that seemingly have all of the power make no decisions on their own. They are influenced by listening to those that are around them. They are actually ended up being fools by listening to the wrong people. But there is wisdom by trusting and listening to God and His word. And so what we've seen throughout the book of Esther thus far is a story of great power, a seemingly powerful Persian king, Xerxes, who is in control. Right? In the very beginning, we see that he is so powerful that he has a 180-day party for 127 provinces, and they come and celebrate. And then after that big party, he has another 7-day party for those that kind of served those 180 days. And yet, at one point, they say, you have a beautiful queen. Can we see her? So the king calls the queen to come so they can observe her beauty. And she rejects it. Eventually, they say, you need a new queen that will listen and obey to you. And so the king, Xerxes, throws out the old queen and has a competition to see who will be the new queen. And this world of the Persians is run by the powerful, right? It's all about how you look and how you appear. As long as you look and appear and do the right things, then you can stay in control, then you can gain power, then you can have influence in this world. And yet, it is a Jew by the name of Esther, whose parents have died, who is beautiful, but has no earthly power, that becomes the queen of Persia. And as we read, as Macy read today, soon after she becomes the queen, her uncle Mordecai becomes influential, but not like king of the world, and he helps avert an assassination of the king. And his reward is to watch at the beginning of chapter 3, as it was recorded in the book of Chronicles, in the presence of the king. And after these things, the king Xerxes promoted Haman the Agagite, a.k.a. the enemy of the Jews, becomes the second command after Mordecai, a Jew, saves them. And eventually Haman hates the Jews so much and hates Mordecai so much for not bowing down and making Haman feel better that he creates a law to kill all the Jews in 12 months. As you might expect, Mordecai, the Jew, is grieving for this. And Esther, who's the queen, hears about this, and she feels sad that Mordecai is sad. And we said last week that there's a big difference between Mordecai's sadness for the destruction, the future destruction of his people, versus Esther's sadness that Mordecai is sad. So Mordecai challenges her, says, you have the potential to get the king's ear. Go into the palace, go into his throne room and tell him, save my people. And Esther knows, just as long as so does Mordecai, that if she does this unannounced and the king doesn't show mercy to her, she will be killed. And Mordecai has the gospel proclaimed to Esther. In Esther chapter 4, starting at verse 12, it says, verse 13, then Mordecai told them to reply, do not think to yourself that in the king's palace you will escape any more than all the other Jews. He's saying, just because you're the queen and you're a Jew doesn't think that you're going to be evaded of all this destruction. For if you keep silent at this time, relief and deliverance will rise for the Jews from another place. But you and your father's house will perish. Mordecai is sad about this law, but he trusts that God will keep his people and save them. And maybe the most famous line in the book of Esther, Esther chapter 4, verse 14 still. And who knows whether you have not come to the kingdom for such a time as this? And Esther's faith is challenged. Esther's faith is challenged. Will she be comfortable in the palace and hope that she can keep her position, not be found out that she is a Jew, not be associated with the people of God, or will she take a step of faith and risk her life for the sake of her people? She responds to Mordecai's gospel presentation and says, "Get everyone to fast and to pray, for I will go do this job." And so when we arrive here at Esther chapter 5, we're going to be in 5, 6, and 7, and we see this kind of pattern of wisdom, foolishness, wisdom. Wisdom, foolishness, and wisdom. And Esther's a unique book because God is never mentioned, and it's completely outside of the land of Israel, and there's no concern or worry about the land. And so it's teaching us, how are we to live outside of the kingdom of God? Or outside of, the kingdom of God, here on earth, here in the United States, where we are in many aspects influenced by Christianity, but not a Christian nation. And I think what this text is telling us today is that it takes wisdom to live outside the kingdom. It takes wisdom to know right and wrong. It takes wisdom to do the right thing. It takes wisdom to take a leap of faith. So she, after 3 days of having everyone pray and everyone fast, it says at the beginning of chapter 5, on the third day, Esther put on her royal robes and stood in the inner courts of the king's palace in front of the king's quarters, while the king was sitting on his royal throne inside the throne room opposite the entrance to the palace. And when the king saw Esther standing in the court, here's the moment of truth. She shows up unannounced. Is she going to be killed for being unannounced, or is she going to find grace and favor? It says, she won favor in his sight, which is a nod to the beauty of Esther throughout. Everyone has seen her. She gains favor because she's beautiful. And the king held out to Esther the golden scepter that was in his hand, pardon her, for showing up unannounced. Then Esther approached and touched the tip of the scepter. And the king said to her, "What is it, Queen Esther?" This is the first time in the book where the king, Xerxes, acknowledges her as queen instead of just his bride that he can be with. "What is it, Queen Esther? What is your request? It shall be given to you even up to half of the kingdom." Now, that is just a very polite way of saying, I'm in a good mood. What do you want? He'll give you what you want, right? And so, what do you think she's going to ask, right? If it's me, sometimes the foolishness of my mind is just, I'm going to ask straightforward what I want. King Xerxes, can you pardon my people, the Jews whom are going to be killed in 12 months? That seems straightforward and the reasonable thing to do. But instead, she says in verse 4, "If it pleases the king, let the king and Haman come today to a feast that I have prepared for the king." Well, that seems, what a great choice by the king, right? See someone that shouldn't be there, I'll pardon them. And now they want to feed me and have a feast and party? In my honor, sure. So the king said, "Bring Haman quickly so that we may do as Esther has asked." So the king and Haman came to the feast that Esther had prepared. And as they were drinking wine after the feast, the king said to Esther, okay, he's feeling pretty good. All right, you've made me feel good. What's your request? What is your wish? It'll be granted to you up to half the kingdom. Then Esther answered, okay, here's the moment. She's going to ask for the king to save her people. "My wish and my request, if I have found favor in the sight of the king, and if it pleases the king to grant my wish and fulfill my request," here it is, "let the king and Haman come to the feast that I will serve for them tomorrow, and I will do as the king has said then." I think there's just a lot of why one feast? And then at the end of the feast, he's feeling good and he's feeling merry about himself. This would be the time to get him to do something. She asked for another feast, another day for this. We're not really sure why, but she has spent 3 days in prayer and fasting along with the Jewish people in Susa, and maybe this is the plan. But I also wonder, in her wisdom, if part of her wisdom isn't to be cunning and kind to kind of earn the request, but almost to allow Haman to trip over himself to show how foolish he is. A proverb says, "Let a fool talk long enough, and they'll reveal all doubt." Right? Let a fool talk long enough, and they will reveal to everyone around them that they are a fool. And so maybe that was her plan. We're not for sure why there's double standard or double feast, but she's being patient. She's waiting her turn. And yet here, in all of this, what we see is that Esther has taken the step of faith. She's taken the step of faith to enter into the court. She has taken the step of faith that God has gone before her in his invisible hand and is leading her to have favor in the sight of the king. Esther had the chance to just sit back in safety as the queen of the palace, that no one knew that she was a Jew, and just to kind of live on the coattails of the faith of her uncle Mordecai, to live out the promises that God will bless the people of God. But instead, she risks her life for her people. Esther actually takes the step of faith to follow God and to trust Mordecai's advice and to seek the good of the people. I don't know about you, but I oftentimes pray for myself and for us that we will be people that are wise, that have wisdom. And maybe for many of us, I don't feel like I am wise and of myself. But sometimes I want to be that wise person. And maybe you want to be that wise person, or maybe you want to be like Esther, to take that bold step of faith to go out there, to do what she has done, to proclaim the gospel to our neighbors or to our family, or to be open with our faith. And sometimes what we have to do is not wait for the moment that we become wise or that we become bold, but it's to just take that step of faith. I was reading this week about a guy who was saying, how do we change? And he's like, one thing I've wanted to do is become more generous. And so he started asking himself in situations of not only giving to the church, but giving his food away after meals and stuff like that. He started asking himself, what would a generous person do? And he said, a generous person would give this food away. Maybe for you, you want to be a wise person. So maybe in a situation, you get to a situation and you ask yourself, well, what would a wise person do? Or if you want to be bold in your faith, and you say, what would a bold person do? Or if you want to read and study God's word more faithfully, you ask yourself, what would someone that reads daily do? Oh, they would read their Bible daily. Esther had just a little bit of time and a little bit of gumption and prayer and fasting and encouragement from the people that she was willing to sacrifice herself for the good of others. She comes before the king with wisdom. And I think it's here that we see the foolishness of Haman and allowing him to trip over his own feet and his own words. For after this, Haman is on cloud 9. Right? He just got invited to the queen's feast with just the king and himself. He's second in command already, but man, he's got to be feeling good about himself. And so it says on the way home, he is just overjoyed. He goes home, he calls his wife, he calls his friends, and he tells everyone about what just happened. I was going to work, and the king calls for me to have a feast with just him and his wife. And they say, but he's like, but on the way home, I saw Mordecai, that Jew, the people of God, and they didn't bow down and worship me, and they give him the idea. They get his ear and say, why don't you just hang him, kill him? And so he has something built to hang Mordecai. And he's so excited that first thing in the morning, he goes to the king the next morning. But as he has left the presence of the dinner and gone to his wife and his friends, in that time, the king goes to bed. The king goes to bed. And what happens in chapter 6, it says that on that night, just any other night, but as we have ears for the Bible, it says on that particular night, the king could not sleep. as Macy read, that he has someone to come read to him, which may sound weird to us, but don't we have, as parents, don't we read to our kids before bed? And so if he can't sleep, he calls someone and says, read to me the book of Chronicles. I want to hear the stories of all the good that I've done. And the good that people that I've done always need to be repaid, because if they do something good for me, I want to show them that if you do good to the king does good to them. And they just happen to come to the part where Mordecai saves his life. And that's it. And they go to the next one. And the king interrupts and says, wait. What did we do for Mordecai? What gift and blessing did we give to him? Nothing. Nothing has been done for him. It's been 9 years since his life was in danger and Mordecai saved him. So the king says, who is in the court? And Haman's coming there early in the morning to get to the king's ear to tell him, I think Mordecai needs to die. And so he says, perfect. Tell Haman. King has no idea why Haman is there, but he's a good worker, employee. And the king asked him, what should be done to the man that the king delights to honor? And man, what does Haman think? Me. The king wants to delight in me. Pride comes before the fall. Why would Haman think if the king is thinking about anyone else? He just had a dinner with just him and the queen, and man, he probably cracked a few jokes, told a couple good stories, and man, everyone had a good time. And so much so that he gets to have another dinner date with just the king and queen again. Of course, the king is talking about me. Who else could he be thinking about? We get the insight of the heart of Haman that his life is all about him. It's all about himself. Haman couldn't imagine that the king was thinking of anyone but him, and Haman thinks that the kingdom, the king, and the world revolves around him. Church, is it not us? Don't we think that everyone thinks about us more than we think of them? We do something silly, and they think, that is going to be with us for the rest of our lives. Right? Maybe we've grown up out of that, but junior hires. I remember in junior high thinking I did something dumb and silly, and I thought about it all night. Everyone's going to hate me at school tomorrow. Everyone's going to think about this 20, 30, 40 years down the road. No one's thinking about that. No one's thinking about that. Because guess what? We think everyone out here is thinking about ourselves. Think about me. And what are we doing? We're thinking about me. I'm putting that arrow not out to you. I'm pointing it back to myself. Well, guess what? If everyone's doing that, is anyone thinking about anyone else? No. Haman is us. He has pride that comes before the fall. Maybe for us, we want to ask ourselves, who has your ear? Who is influencing you to think about yourself and your glory and your hope? Oftentimes, we are completely unaware of the trends in the world that affect us, the people that are influencing us. We can talk about social media at this point, or we could talk about our friends group, but to give an example, I think it's interesting, baby names, and how there are trends within baby names. You think, if you had a kid, you think, I've never heard this name before. Like when we named Ty or Lana, we were like, okay, we know one Ty, and we heard Lana one time. Never heard of it before. And we thought, we're going to be unique, we're going to be cool, and we did. We named it Ty and Lana. You know how many Tys are in the school now? Now, there's not as many Lanas, but there's still a lot of Lanas all of a sudden. And we're like, we had never heard of that before. Right? Think about this. Like, when my generation, there's a lot of Calebs, there's a lot of Jacobs, there's a lot of Daniels, there's a lot of what I would think of like basic boy names. Well, you don't hear as many of those now because everyone thinks, well, we don't want to name, everyone knows a Daniel. All right? I think my sister's named Jennifer, and my mom at one point said, I've never heard of the name Jennifer. Well, guess what? It was the most popular name in the world for a baby girl like the year before she was born. We are completely, oftentimes, unaware of the influence of others in our lives. And so what trend is this text telling us that maybe revealing to us in our lives? This expressive individualism, Right? Haman is saying it's all about me and my own. Right? We live this is the air we breathe today. If it doesn't make me happy or satisfy me, then someone else must be wrong. Do what is best for me and my family. We think, make sure that you have enough money for your family or your expenses or your trip. We oftentimes devalue the community. And the foolishness of Haman is that he thinks the world is around him and he listens to the fools around him. So the question becomes, how do we live wisely in this world? It's in wisdom. Well, obviously, but how do we gain wisdom? It's often from others and from God and his word. Who has your ear? Sometimes we just need to be humble and admit that the world is not about me. Though you may not see God in your life, he is there. He is not mentioned in this book, but you see each and every time that it just happens to be the night that he couldn't sleep. Remember that your faith in him is a grace that he has given to you, and that he is working in you in hundreds and thousands of millions of ways you don't see in the moment. You've never heard of a Jennifer before. You've never heard of a Daniel before, and yet God is working in your life. So, what does he tell him? Haman is told, how should we honor someone? And he says, give him the best stuff and go before the city and let everyone know that those who bless the king are blessed in return. And he says, great, I love your idea, Haman. Go do it to Mordecai. What, not me? God's invisible hand is everywhere. Haman does what the king is told, and man, to an enemy of the Jewish people and an enemy of Mordecai, he does it because of the pressure of not doing it. And so he returns home after all this, mourning and with his head covered, and Haman told his wife and his friends everything that had happened. And man, there had to be some good razzing. They had to be making fun of him. You just went to the king to get this guy killed, and now he's honored, and you had to do it. Haman went home ashamed and lost some street cred from his wife and friends, but at least that's all. At least he's still beloved by the king and queen. And after he's done doing this, there's not a moment later that the eunuchs, the people come and get Haman and bring him to the second feast. Haman's got to be thinking to himself, oh, you know what? There was a moment that we had to think about Mordecai, but at least now I'm back. And so they go have this party, and after the party, after they have drank, in chapter 7, it says, verse 3, or the king asks him, all right, Queen Esther, what do you want? Should we grant